of ceremonies. So I'm not going to be talking about birds, fishes, the ocean, the forest, or anything like that. Maybe anti-fishing as it relates to security. Yeah, but not whales and dolphins and that kind of thing. Actually, what I'll do in this presentation is give a perspective of where ICANN fits into the overall ecosystem, because like we mentioned briefly in the opening remarks, there are lots of different parts to this whole system, ecosystem. And as you'll see throughout the presentation, every organization has a role to play, but you need to understand these different roles in order to determine where you fit in. It's a little bit like university where in the first year, you're compelled to take all of these general subjects so that you get an understanding, of broad areas before you actually focus, on the area that you're really interested in. So when I started, for example, I could understand why they wanted me to do politics 101, and strategy 101. I had no interest in those topics, but I didn't understand at the time that it was important, even though you were not going to specialize topics, spend some time in history, geography, and all these things that you don't really have any liking for before you get into your technical stuff. So you have to go through a little bit of that. So bear with us as we explain certain aspects of the ecosystem, which at first may appear that they don't have any direct relevance to you, but later on you may see where this information fits in. So this is my brief agenda. We look a little bit about what ICANN is, where it fits in the internet ecosystem, our mission, values, role, and so on. Very importantly, we will touch the multi-stakeholder model. You've heard Secretary General use that term, and I will also be using it frequently. And this is one of the pillars of the very Internet Governance Forum that we are in here today, as well as the Global Internet Governance Forum. This whole issue of multi-stakeholderism, and I have some more goodies here. And when we get to that multi-stakeholder part, you can prepare yourself. There are 4 of them that I'm planning to give away when we talk about the model. Who participates? How do they participate? And then finally, I thought it would be good for me to, touch the surface, give you a taste of the kinds of topics that we discuss. At the end of SG's presentation, she mentioned some specific topics as well. The whole idea is that when we're starting to speak very generally of multi-stakeholder model, you should participate. We encourage participation without going into specifics. So I will leave at least 2 specifics with you so you'll get a sense of why you need to participate in this session. So what is ICANN, Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers? We focus on the names, numbers, and protocol parameters along with our partners. Very important. The theme of the IGF, building partnership for good internet governance. Everything that we are doing in this ecosystem revolves around partnership and collaboration. So what ICANN does, it does not do on its own. It does in collaboration with other organizations. And first of all, ICANN in the internet ecosystem works alongside other technical organizations who themselves are part of the internet ecosystem. On the numbers side, ICANN manages the number system, and we distribute numbers globally, but we do this through organizations that are referred to as regional internet registries. ICANN gives those RIRs, the numbers in blocks. Those RIRs in turn pass on those blocks to other organizations. And the RIRs, the regional internet registries, cover the globe in sections. There's one covering Africa, there's one covering North America, Canada, and part of the Caribbean. There's one covering Latin America and the other part of the Caribbean, one covering Asia, and another one covering Europe. So ICANN works very closely with those regional internet registries, and ICANN also works closely with standards bodies, because everything that we do in order to be able to talk to each other has to conform to common standards. And you have organizations like the ISO, the International Organization for Standards, you have the Internet Engineering Task Force, the IEEE, and so on. When it comes to the names, www.facebook.com, www.ctu.int, www, what does it say on that banner? ISOC.vc. So when it comes to all of those names, ICANN coordinates with domain name system operators, and we also coordinate with what are referred to as root server operators. When you type in, can anybody tell me what happens when you type in google.com into your browser? What happens when you type in google.com?
I can tell you, but somebody else to get that.
It sends you to Barbados? Good. It sends you to Google Barbados, and that upsets you, right? So maybe that's something you should be talking about at your Internet Governance Forum. Why is it that when you type in google.com, you end up in Barbados or St. Lucia or somewhere other than St. Vincent, Jamaica? It sometimes goes to google.vc. So what actually happens, partial answer, so I won't give this away. So you partly correct. So what happens is that there's a translation, your local internet service provider does not necessarily know where to find Google's website. It doesn't know the IP address for Google's website. So it has to go higher up the chain. It has to go to a root server. So there's this whole system of root servers where when you type in a domain name, this thing gets converted, and then eventually you end up at the website that you want to get to. So there are all these technical partners that ICANN works with, but also other partners. And this is where you start getting a sense of the different types of roles that organizations have when it comes to the internet. So you have ICANN here. We know what ICANN deals with, names and numbers, but we work very closely with the Diplo Foundation for capacity building. We work with messaging, malware, and mobile anti-abuse network. Here's some of the things that we were talking about, anti-phishing. We try to help with security on the internet, and there are groups dealing with that. We work with regional internet governance forums, like the Caribbean Internet Governance Forum, and maybe I need to put another circle on here for National Internet Governance Forum as well. And we also work with the Global Internet Governance Forum and other international organizations like ISOC and the UN, which are well known. And when we get down to this level, what you find is that each of the organizations focus on one area. ICANN is going to focus on names and numbers. You'll never hear me talking anything related to, for example, I can say the word now just to say that I don't say anything about this officially, but you'll never hear ICANN talking about net neutrality. Why? Because that deals with issues of content. If we deal with the system of connecting devices on the internet, then ICANN can talk to you for the whole. I can talk to you for the whole day of that. So each organization in this ecosystem has a different role. Part of your job is understanding what those specialized roles are of each of the organizations, so you can then see where you as an individual fit in, where your colleagues fit in, where other organizations fit in, where you need to go if you have a particular type of concern or a particular issue based on this whole ecosystem. So I cannot help you with every single internet problem, but I may be able to tell you, okay, well, you need to go to the CTU, or you need to go to ISOC, or you need to go to the anti-phishing working group, or something like that. But you need to understand the whole system to be able to know where you fit in. So ICANN is part of the internet ecosystem, but even within ICANN, there is an internal ecosystem made up of these three parts. This first circle at the top here, the community, is the multi-stakeholder community, the most important part of the internet ecosystem. So who can tell me some of the stakeholder groupings that are in the multi-stakeholder system? Okay. One. Tell me one. And say it so everybody can hear you.
Okay. You have private sector.
Private sector, stop. Some other stakeholders in the multi-stakeholder system? Close, but I'm not giving it away for that. What general grouping would an ISP fall into? Well, I'll give you one for business at the back there, because business is a different stakeholder group. So you can pass that back there. Coming back, you still have a chance for me what kind of grouping ISPs fall into. Businesses, technical.
No.
Oh, okay. Even worse, Roxa. I can't say it. Technical. You're planning to say that, so I'll give it to you. I have one more. Important one. NGOs.
NGOs.
Okay. NGOs. NGOs. You go with anything. There's one that starts with G. Women said governments. She can give it to somebody else if she wants. So the point here is that, and we didn't cover all of them, the point here is that no stakeholder is excluded. No individual, organization, no private sector entity, no not-for-profit. Everyone is included. Why? Because everybody uses the internet. Every business is connected to the internet. Everybody uses that for emails, for instant messages, and so on. And the whole idea is that all of these stakeholders in the ICANN ecosystem have a voice. Also, when it comes to this Internet Governance Forum, the idea is that it should be all inclusive. You cannot solve the problem of net neutrality, for example, by only having the ISPs in the room. You cannot solve that problem by only having the businesses in the room. You cannot solve it by having every single member of government alone in the room. It must be a multi-stakeholder approach where the entire community is represented so you can hear the diverse views of all of the different parts of the community. I'll give you an example. I mean, there's a lot of debate, for example, in forums like CANTO, which used to stand for the Caribbean Network, or Caribbean Association of Network National Telecoms Operators. There's a lot of discussion in the topic of OTTs, over-the-top services. Okay, on the one hand, you have the telcos who are saying, no, we shouldn't allow over-the-top services. And on the other hand, you have the end users saying, well, no, we love WhatsApp. Right? And then you have government saying, well, some ministers saying in one position, other ministers giving another position. You cannot address that type of issue by just having one of the stakeholder groups in the room. Everybody has to be present so you can hear the view of the end user, you can hear the view of the telco, you can hear the view of the government. And this is why this multi-stakeholder approach is important, not only with ICANN, but also with regard to dealing with national issues of Internet Governance Forum. So you have the multi-stakeholder community in ICANN, which develops policy, gives it to the board of ICANN for final approval. And once the board approves this policy, then it comes over to us, the ICANN staff, the ICANN organization, for implementation. And that's how the ICANN ecosystem works. And from this perspective, you have what we call supporting organizations representing the numbers community and representing the names community. We have two types of names: generic names, .coms, .orgs, .hotels, .cars, and you have the country code names, .vc, .lc, .db, and so on. So those groupings develop policy first by identifying issues, giving an issue report, initiating what we call a PDP, a policy development process. And then once that process has started, there's a call for these famous volunteers. These persons like yourself from the community who have day jobs, who have families, who sometimes have more than one day job. So there's a call for these people to add another job, to their lives where they actually contribute to policy development. The community is consulted, and then eventually the board gets a draft policy document where it makes a decision, and then the policy is given over to the ICANN staff for implementation. That's how it works in a nutshell. And then you have the advisory bodies, one advisory body representing users, one advisory body representing governments, another one representing the root server operators, and one representing security. So each of these are avenues or routes through which your voice can be heard on a particular policy that affects the internet unique identifiers. If you are an ISP, you might go through a technical route. If you are a representative of a national government, and ICANN is planning to allow, for example, country names in the domain name system, then your government representative, as St. Vincent will soon have one in the governmental advisory committee, will stand up in the GAC and say, well, St. Vincent doesn't think that this is a very good idea, and we have our other 14, colleagues from representing other Caribbean governments, including the CTU, who are all here to say in the ICANN forum that this is a bad idea. If we are not present to let our concerns be heard in these global forums, guess what's going to happen? Others who are there will vote on topics that may affect us negatively because we did not stand up to say this is going to affect us negatively or this is what we would like. And this is why it's important to participate. So ICANN for the end user means that you have DNS, a domain name system that converts names to numbers. It means that you can participate in an open and transparent way in policy development. It means that ICANN staff will be here to try to help you develop a very vibrant and diverse community. And also, we have the country code, top-level domain names that you can use, and also the generic ones. Now, I'm happy to pause and take questions as we go along. Rudy was doing backflips, so.
I don't know whether I'm not copying it to everyone, but for all the groups that you mentioned. Oh, right.
Yeah, I don't know whether it's obvious to everybody, but all the groups that you've mentioned, and then all the advisory committees at the bottom, right? They comprise of volunteers, people like you, me, and everyone else. So that is very important, actually, although they look very sort of highfalutin and everything else, but they actually comprise of the community. Yeah.
That is a very important point that Rudy was making. So that circle that I had, that yellow circle at the top representing the multi-stakeholder community, that includes all of these groups here. The government reps, the end users, security folk, technical folk, folk dealing with generic top-level domains, country code domains, and people dealing with numbers. So all of this community here has nothing to do with me. I just work for ICANN. I work for you. You're the one who decides what my job is going to entail. So you need to participate and make sure that I have interesting work to do. And all the other 400 ICANN staff members. So that's what we're here to do. We're here to facilitate and help you do what's good for your country in terms of policies surrounding the internet. This particular slide deals more with the numbers, and just as you have the ICANN ecosystem and you have the broader internet ecosystem, this is another subsystem that deals with IP addresses. Now, I only have one more of these. Should I give it away now, or should I save it for later? I'll leave it here. No, I'll give it away now. So, how many IP addresses are there in IPv6? A lot is not a number, it doesn't count. I can't subtract anything from a lot. How many IP addresses are there in IPv6? Or what is the difference between, since you can't answer that one, that was a trick question and it's too late to Google.
No, I'm not Googling.
Oh, okay.
Right? But I know somebody who should know the answer.
No.
Right?
Are they in this room?
I'm going to ask Ms. Lewis.
Tough, she's so you lost that battle already. What is the difference between IPv4 and IPv6? 6 has more numbers. Every device on the internet must have an IP address. You look around the room, you see an Asus laptop, an Apple, some other brand there that must be running this thing called Windows. I don't know what people do that, sorry. But a number of PCs, cell phones, all kinds of devices, watches. Every single device have an IP address. When this thing started, just like computers. I mean, when the first computer came out, the guy said, okay, we're going to have 3 computers in the world. And somebody said, 3? Why do you need so many? What could you ever possibly do with 3 computers? That's how it started. And it was a similar start when it came to internet numbers. I mean, IPv4, we're just going to need a couple thousand, maybe about 5 million or something. Nobody's ever going to have more internet devices than that. What happened? They were wrong. We We never dreamed that our dog would be having an IP address, our TV, each of us would be having 3 cell phones. We didn't think that this would be possible, but this is what happened. So the amount of IP addresses that we had originally in version 4 ran out. So this new system was defined, which has 340 undecillion IP addresses. And then if you can tell me the number of zeros in an undecillion, I'll still give this to you, but it might take a while.
Somebody knows.
There's one thing I do sometimes that there is enough IP addresses in 96 that cover every square inch of the earth.
Yeah.
That was the last analogy.
Another analogy, I don't know how true this one is, and I have no data to substantiate this. Another analogy is there's at least one for every grain of sand.
Every grain of sand.
And that's a lot.
Oh, that's a lot.
That is a lot.
340
undecillion. We know what what's it, 1,000 is, that's 3 zeros. We know what a million is, that's another 3 zeros. We know what a billion is, that's another 3 zeros. We know what a trillion is, that's another 3 zeros. And now we start going. From trillion, you go to, no, not zillion. What's the word for quadrillion? That's another 3 zeros. And then you have a quintillion, another 3 zeros. And you have a septillion, that's another 3 zeros. You keep going. You have a septillion for 7, another 3 zeros. Then you have an octillion, add 3 zeros. Nonillion, you add another 3 zeros. And then you get to undecillion, which is another 3 zeros. If you have enough space on your paper to write down all those zeros, that will be the number of IPv6 addresses that are 340 undecillion.
It's really easy to say that it will work for this generation and the next.
I wouldn't be brave enough to say that. Okay, because all you have to do is say something like, okay, we found a way to give every blood cell in the body an IP address for medical purposes. And next thing you know, you start running out of addresses again. So I'm not going to be the one to tell you how we're going to have, those addresses for, but I can tell you for now, it meets our needs at least for a few years. But the idea is that these organizations are the ones which hand out these IP addresses to regions. ARIN for North America, Canada, and part of the Caribbean, and LATNIC for Latin America and part of the Caribbean, Africa, and so on. And there are still, for example, a few IPv4 addresses left. I shouldn't be saying that because I want you all to use IPv6. But the question is, who gets those IPv4 addresses? Is it the ICANN staff who decide? No, you are the ones who decide. Because you participate in ARIN and LATNIC policy development. I think Roxanne is an ARIN fellow as well. So they have similar policy development processes, bottoms up, multi-stakeholder, where you as individuals, as an ISP, you can go to an ARIN meeting and say, well, you feel the policy should change. And, I'm from Digicel, or I'm from Cable & Wireless, I'm from Lime, and you should allow to have more IP addresses so we can do more technical work. And you can go to these meetings and participate and simply say so. And you can get your friends to go with you, 10 of you all go from Lime. When Digicel is having an effect. Digicel had something here last week, right? And the amount of Digicel people who were there, you bring your crew. So when you go to these global meetings, you can bring your crew, Caribbean crew, and influence global policy in a way that affects your territory, your region positively. So we already said all of this stuff. We coordinate the names and numbers. You participate in policy. Very important for ICANN is that we focus our work using these core values, preserving the stability, security, and resiliency of the domain name system. So you will not typically hear ICANN staff talking generally about cybersecurity. Although we are very interested in the stability, security, and resiliency of the domain name system, but you will hear us talking a lot about DNS security, because that is our focus area. So when ISOC, for example, has a cybersecurity event, I'll sit in the back of the room until it's time to talk about DNS security, and then I'll come and give my presentation. You wouldn't hear me much talking about other aspects, because those aspects are outside the remit of this particular organization in the ecosystem. So ICANN doesn't do everything, ISOC doesn't do everything, ARIN doesn't do everything, but each of these organizations has a specific role that they play in the whole ecosystem. And we employ open and transparent bottoms-up processes, which is a little bit different to typically what the world has been accustomed to in the telecoms arena. Typically in telecoms, and Bernadette would be able to tell you this, things would go top-down. The governments of the different regions would meet and decide on telecoms policy, and then it would eventually get to the end user. But in the internet ecosystem, and in IGFs and in ICANN, typically it's bottoms up. You at the bottom of the, and bottom in no negative or derogatory term, just in terms of the layout and look, you are the ones who decide what issues you're going to be talking about. We saw the policy development process. The first thing that will happen in the policy development process is you will say, okay, this is an issue that's affecting me in St. Vincent. I think we should have a policy on it. Let's get a working group of volunteers to make an issue report. The issue report comes, and then you have a call for volunteers to work on a policy development process. It's not that the head of ICANN or the head of the government or the prime minister decided that this was an issue that we needed a policy on. It was you, the stakeholders from the bottom, who decided what the policy is to be discussed. And this is what we're talking about here, the multi-stakeholder model. So in ICANN, we have SOs and ACs. We speak in acronyms. Eventually, you get to understand them. Supporting organizations and advisory committees. And these, the multi-stakeholder community is made up, like we said, of volunteers based on an open collection of global stakeholders. Here at this St. Vincent IGF, we have a multi-stakeholder grouping. I can see we have government, we have private sector, we have FinLec, we have more government over there. ITSD, that's government again. We have FinLec at the back, private. My friend at the front is private. We have civil society, people, not-for-profits, and so on. We have a technical community. This is a multi-stakeholder grouping. You represent diverse backgrounds. This is what you need in your Internet Governance Forum. Please continue when you have your meetings like this to have this diverse representation, because it is only by having the government here, the private sector here, the technical community, the not-for-profits, that you can truly reflect the needs and the interests of everybody in your community. Last week you had the ICT week, and at the launching I had a chat with your Minister for Telecoms, Honorable Camilo Gonzalez, and he indicated to me face-to-face that his government supports these kinds of initiatives. So you have no excuse. Okay, you have your minister and you have the cabinet behind these initiatives, so it's for you now to step up to the plate and do, your part. So we've gone through this already, and everybody's represented. Numbers communities, CCTLDs, generic names, the governments, the roots, and security. So how can you participate in what happens at ICANN? ICANN has 3 meetings per year. We just had a meeting 2 weeks ago in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and the next meeting is going to be on the 25th of June in Panama. I think there's an ARIN meeting coming up next week in Miami. I know there's somebody from St. Vincent who's a fellow. Who's the person? You know one who's going? Yeah. So we might be on the same flight. We'll hang out when we get up there. Right? But the whole idea is that one of the ways to participate is like physically going to these meetings. Not everybody can go physically. And that's why Rudy and myself and Bernadette in 2007, we got ICANN to pay for us to go to the first meeting where fellows were allowed, where ICANN paid for the airfare, paid for our hotel, gave us a small stipend, and we were allowed to go and experience that. And then afterwards, I became ICANN staff. The meeting before that meeting was in Abu Dhabi, and this lady sitting right here got the opportunity to go to Abu Dhabi, to go to that ICANN meeting, and my company, which did not pay for me to go to Abu Dhabi, sent Roxanne to that meeting. So this is what can happen with the fellowship program. But by going to that meeting, I guarantee you that Rudy and Bernadette and Roxanne, definitely, we have a much better understanding of what this whole multi-stakeholder community is and how it actually functions. And sometimes people laugh when I say this, but going to an ICANN meeting is like going to Carnival. From the perspective that, first of all, you have to prepare yourself. When Carnival is coming, when do we go? Go to the gym, all right? We take care of our hair, we prepare ourselves, we study, right? We know all the dance moves and everything. But for an ICANN meeting, you have to be fit. because there are like 13 parallel tracks going on at the same time, and you're literally running from room to room. Okay, so you just left a government meeting, you want to go to a technical meeting, and you work hard for the whole day at these meetings. And believe you me, you are expected also from 6 o'clock to play hard at all the social events. You have to go to all the cocktails, all the karaoke, you have to go singing until 2 o'clock in the morning, wake up, 7 o'clock and do it all again the next day. Because when you go to the social events, you eyeball people. After a few drinks, I really get to know this guy, at a social event. So when I have to send him an email later on, I know the guy that I'm dealing with. I'm not just sending an email to an address, which is somewhere vague. I know the guy. I saw him, enjoy himself singing karaoke. So I know what kind of person he is. And this is why the social events, the coffee breaks, that's why they call it working breaks. Always go to the lunch. Always go to the coffee break. Always go to the social. If there's a talk, 5 of you from the region, stick together, people you've never met. Because when you're developing policy, you have to negotiate, you have to give or take. And you need to know the kinds of people that you're dealing with in order to be negotiate properly with them. You can at these public meetings can attend remotely. And very importantly, this orange square right here, attend events in your region. When Roxanne sends you another email that says that the Internet Society chapter is having a capacity building on cybersecurity, go to the event. Tell them, look, the last time we had an event, there were some empty chairs. This time, we want them to bring additional chairs into the room because this is important. Go to your local events because this is where it starts. This is why I really applaud what's happening in the Internet Governance Forum, because it's a local event. It's where you get a chance to talk about your local issues. Now, who participates? We already spoke about this. Businesses know that the internet is important for the reason, so they participate. If any business organization in here says yes to any of the questions, then they definitely should be participating in this forum. You will get these slides afterwards. It's open to everyone, and the decisions that are taken in global fora affect local businesses. So don't think that, these guys, they went to Abu Dhabi and they had this meeting and they took decisions and this is not going to affect. It will affect you. For example, there's something called GDPR. GDPR, what does that stand for? GDPR, okay, nobody answered in the specified time. Put it back. General Data Protection Regulation. And in very simple terms, it's something that's happening in Europe, where the Europeans are putting some rules into place which have to be complied with by any organization which is keeping data for European citizens. So what this means is that if you're an ISP and you're using some kind of cloud service which is based somewhere in Europe, you'll be forced to comply with that data protection regulation. And you can't just take personal information and do with it as you choose, because there will be severe fines. And this actually goes into effect by the end of May. By a show of hands, how many people in here are familiar with what's happening with GDPR? 1%, Ribéry and Rudy. You all should be, because it may affect you in some way, shape, or form. And this is why you need to pay attention to what's happening in the global forum. So the fellowships are very important, and typically that's a term that you will hear with several of these organizations in the internet ecosystem, ICANN, ISOC for the IETF, ARIN, and LACNIC. We want you to participate. We want to see the ISPs in the room. We want to see academia in the room. We want to see private sector in the room. We want governments to be represented. So what do? We spend money to try to get you interested. It's like a child and a child eating vegetables and greens. The child doesn't like the taste of this, callaloo and all these lettuce and all these kind of things. It's not as interesting as a hamburger or something else. So you literally have to encourage and bribe the child to eat the vegetables, even though the vegetables are good for the child. So it's not exactly the same thing. I think you have an appreciation of how important this is, but at the same time, the organizations are trying to do their best to encourage you to participate. Okay, Roxanne, you want to go to Abu Dhabi? I'll send you. Okay? to the ICANN meeting. There's an ICANN meeting coming up in Barcelona. Okay, first with Spanish, what will we do? We'll have interpretation in the 8 UN languages and Portuguese, so that even though the meeting is in Barcelona, you will not have a problem participating. So with the fellowship program for these 3 meetings, you can apply to attend any one of those meetings. And if you are successful, ICANN or ARIN or LACNIC will pay for your transportation, your flights, and your accommodation to attend the meeting, and you'll get a small stipend. You have to make a good case. If you just tell me that, okay, I want to go to Abu Dhabi and ride camels, you know, and see the palaces, sending you. All right, you have to tell me something like, well, you know, I work with a private company, which is an internet service provider, or I have a not-for-profit, and we're very interested, you know, in these issues. And we went to the ICANN website, and we saw this GDPR thing, and we want to have some capacity building sessions. So you make a case. All right, you can also say that you attended the St. Vincent IGF, organized by the local chapter. And if you send me an email and I remember that you were here, I can put in a good word for you to make your case stronger. I don't make the final case, but I can make your case stronger. Okay? I can say, yes, it's true. Rudy was in the room. Rudy did actually attend the IGF. All right? So the whole idea is that we really want you to participate. And don't worry. I mean, I've said this before. Roxanne has heard this. You're not going to understand everything the first time. And I've given this story in St. Vincent already. The first time, you know, I walked into one of the sessions at ICANN. I heard somebody stand up and say, well, the CCSO is considering a PDP on IBNs and they need to discuss it with the GAC and the ESAC. So I know they have translation. So I immediately went to the back of the room and I picked up the headphones because these people could not have been speaking English. Okay, there was not one real well, I understood the third. All right, but the truth is they were actually speaking English. But because it was my first time, it took a little while for me to learn and understand what they were saying. So we understand this. So even if you get one fellowship to an ICANN meeting, you will be allowed to go to a second one and a third one. But by the time you hit the third one, we expect you to come back home and start mobilizing. Join, you know, the ISOC chapter, start doing things. Do something in your school, do something in your organization, you know, do something with the Chamber of Commerce if you're from the business sector. Do something, you know, with academia. So the idea is that there are opportunities to participate, and if you show some interest, we can guide you in how to take advantage of some of these opportunities. So I know I've been going on for a while. I'm trying to finish quickly. You can prepare yourself before you go to the meetings by taking a lot of these online courses, learn.icann.org. And if you just go to the ICANN website, icann.org, in the top right-hand corner, there's a search box. Anything you said in here, any acronym, you just type it in. And typically there are videos, there's definitely text explanations where you can get an understanding of what it's all about. So generally speaking, that's what the ecosystem is like. You have different players, different partners, and you need to see where you fit in. From an ICANN perspective, there are 2 topics that are being discussed right now. One of them deals with auction proceeds. You may be aware that we started off with these boring domain names that end in .com, .org, .edu. And guess what happened? You, the community, said, look, we don't like these names. What does .edu mean? What does .com mean? We want real names, like .cars, .perfume, .apple, .hotel, all right, .Coca-Cola, all right? And then you have one of the Coca-Cola companies all over the world, St. Vincent.Coca-Cola or St. Vincent.Apple. So the community decided that there should be a new set of generic top-level domains. It went through the policy development process. The community was consulted, the board agreed, and there were these new GTLDs. But guess what happens? I want to have a domain called .rum, because I know I have the best rum in St. Lucia. You also from St. Vincent have the mistaken notion that St. Vincent has good rum as well. So you want to have .rum for your domain name. No, sorry. Guys are really throw things at me. So there's contention. Both of us want the same name. So ICANN staff does not decide. The community came up with a mechanism called the auctions, where there's an auction of last resort, and then if his pockets are deeper than mine, he gets .rum. Not because the St. Vincent rum necessarily is better than some of the other rums around, But the idea is that all of this money is collected from the auctions. ICANN staff put that money in a separate bank account. Right now, there are 253 million US dollars in that bank account. What do we do with that money? What should we do with it? Who should decide what happens with that money? You, the stakeholders. Right now, there is a process going on within ICANN to decide on the procedures that will be used for dispersing these auction proceeds from the new GTLB program. That's the orange block down there. And if we, as a country, I say we because I consider myself a Caribbean citizen, if we as St. Vincent and the Grenadines, or we as a Caribbean, do not participate in that discussion that's going on there, what do you think is going to happen? The people who are there will decide what happens to this 253 million US dollars. You think they're going to send in for us out here if we don't ask for it, just out of the goodness and kindness of their hearts? I don't think so. So we need to participate. That is one tangible example of why we need to be a part of the discussion. Another reason why we should be part of this discussion has to do with security. We want to move to using payment platforms. So when Minister Gonzalez made his presentation, he lamented the fact that it's the exception and not the norm that you can use plastic in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Before he said that, I had that experience. When I travel, you know, if I go, you know, Los Angeles or even so far away, and I take a taxi, I can swipe my credit card in the taxi. I mean, I expect that when I go into any one of the shops to buy anything that I will use a card. And then I was here, I went in, I can't remember where, I think I went for some food or something, and I tried to pay with my credit card, and the lady said, no, I'm sorry, you need to wheel and come again with this thing. So the whole idea is we are trying in the Caribbean to move from a system of traditional cash into electronic payments, but then the issue of security arises. And if you're keeping your money at Bank of SVG or any other financial institution which has online banking, Scotiabank or any of the others, you want to have a level of safety that your transactions are secure. Now, DNSSEC is a technology that ICANN came up with to add a lot of security to the domain name system. When you type in Bank of SVG.vc, if that is the address, that has to get translated to an IP address. And the bad guys have figured out a way in that translation process to jump in and do a man-in-the-middle attack, so that when you think you're going to your bank, you're going to a hacker's website. And then next thing you know, you give the hacker your username and your password, and you go back and you check your account and you realize that you're broke. If it's me who checks my account, then that's a normal situation because I'm usually broke anyway. So it's not a big problem. But if Andre Bailey over there goes and he realizes that his millions are down to just, you know, a few cents, then that's a big problem. Okay, he's laughing. I don't know why he's laughing, but but the idea is that DNSSEC is something that your ISPs have a role to play in deploying. And I spoke to them already. You need to ask your ISPs, have you deployed DNSSEC so that my online transactions can be safer? And if they tell you they're not sure, you send them to do their homework. I know they're listening to me right now. I already spoke to them and I told them you'll be coming. As a national community, you can mobilize, go to the ISPs and say, look, this technology can help us be safer. You need to deploy it. You can go to your government representatives and say, well, you need to consider some sort of policy, you know, that deals with this issue of security. It's something that you can discuss at your national IGF, which will affect you directly in Trinidad and Tobago. Not Trinidad and Tobago, yeah, they have that same problem in Trinidad. So I'm not going to explain all of this, but basically a man-in-the-middle attack is an attack where you think you're going to your bank, but you in truth going to a hacker's website. You give your username and password, he harvests it, and then all of a sudden thousands of accounts are compromised. With DNSSEC, there's less of a likelihood that that will actually happen.
But I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
Well, actually someone online is asking. I suspect that the ICF, not ICANN, came up with DNSSEC. Am I wrong?
Okay, well, because of the collaboration that takes place in the internet ecosystem, There are people from ICANN who are on the ITF. There are people from the ITF who participate in policy development. Within ICANN, there is an entity known as the SAC, the Security, Stability, and Advisory Committee. So it could be that maybe the origin of DNSSEC started in the ITF. It could be that it started in the SAC. As I stand here before you, I can't precisely, without a grain of doubt, give you the exact answer. It could have been anyone, but you would understand that because of the nature of how things operate, it could have been any of those two organizations. And I guess you can always Google it and say who actually came up with it, but it is a technology that definitely is being promoted by ICANN to everyone. So we don't really care that much where it came from, but we know that our SAC has reviewed that technology and is promoting it as a way to make the online transactions more secure, particularly as it relates to the DNS. So ICANN is charged with the responsibility of managing the domain name system. We've signed the root of the DNS system with a particular key. For deploying DNSSEC along the chain, everybody has a job to do. The ISPs have to allow DNSSEC traffic to pass. So I would focus a little bit more on what we need to do to deploy this technology to ensure that we are safe in terms of using the online transactions. So thank you very much for being so attentive. I still have one of these left. Maybe during the course of the day, we'll give a few more questions. Yeah, sure, I'll take questions. No, you can't have this unless you answer a question.
What I want to ask, you mentioned that we should approach our service providers to see how they can implement it. But is there anything that we can do from the consumer side to ensure that we are secure?
Okay, so for DNSSEC to work, there are several entities who have to do their job, because DNSSEC is adding authentication to that process of asking for the IP address for a domain name. bankofstvincent.com. If my computer needs to go to that website, I need to do the IP address. I need to know the IP address. So I ask, what is the IP address for Bank of St. Vincent? And you're going to give me an answer. If before you give me that answer, somebody else jumps in, he's the hacker, and he says Bank of St. Vincent is x.x.x.x, and I go to his website and I get hacked. So instead of just accepting his answer, I want to have a way of authenticating. Who are you? Is your certificate signed? Is your information correct? Are you really legitimate? You have that authentication system, which is DNSSEC. For that authentication system to be set to work, ICANN has to sign the root, put some credentials on there. Your ISP has to allow the traffic to pass. Your web hosting company must have a certificate on there to indicate that, yes, my website is legitimate. And your browser also on its end, has certain things to do to ensure that it understands DNSSEC traffic. If any one of those pieces is not in place, the entire system falls down. So forget that ICANN has signed the root. Forget that the browser is working properly. If your ISP is not allowing DNSSEC traffic to pass, or is not doing the authentication, the call and response, checking this guy out. Okay, he says that this is the IP address. Is it really the IP address? If your ISP is not doing that, then regardless of what you do as an end user, the whole system falls down. So yes, there's certain things that you can do as a Bank of St. Vincent. You insist that the person you're buying the domain name from is running DNSSEC. In the case of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, your .vc, I can tell you, is with DNSSEC. So you are actually safer if you use a domain name that ends in .vc than you may be if you use one of the domain names that ends in .com. Why? Because not all .com operators have deployed DNSSEC. Your .vc has deployed DNSSEC. So that's a plugin there for anybody who's selling .vc domain names. This guy sitting over there. Okay, thank you very much.
All right, we thank you very much, Mr. Daniels. Put your hands together for that very informative presentation on the ecosystem, or understanding rather the internet